Newsflash, Trump has found a way to guarantee that he gets into heaven. It's called an executive order to God. In this video, I'm going to unpack executive orders and assess whether he might go to heaven and some ideas that could perhaps increase his chances of getting into heaven. First of all, what is an executive order? Well, an executive order is authority he already has regarding the management of the branch, of the executive branch. What I mean by that is executive orders are like when the water sprinklers are supposed to go on and off. They're not, they cannot create laws, even though he tries, or is, I sometimes wonder if there's a blank, he leaves a bunch of executive orders laying around and some of his minions just said, hey, this is a good idea to oppress people. Why don't we just do this? So executive orders are being abused. They're claiming to create laws, which they do not. So they're far exceeding their authority. And so they're not worth the paper they're written on. So if some country relies on an executive order, yeah, we'll defend you if you're attacked. And here's the executive order. Even though we're supposed to have a treaty, the executive order is just as good. No, it's not. So good luck with that because you're going to get stiffed because that executive order, when it tries to bypass the treaty provisions of the Constitution, is just not enforceable. Now, let's talk about, now we've got that aside, is that could he issue an executive order to God? Well, no. But nevertheless, what we want to focus on now is assess, for example, the likelihood of whether he should be worried about getting into heaven or not. Apparently, it's been on his mind lately. Well, let's see. As one way of assessment and evaluation, we could look at the 10 Commandments. Has he violated any of the 10 Commandments? Well, let's see. Let's see. You shall not have strange gods before me. Well, he's considered himself the chosen one, and the religious right has not challenged him on that. So he's claiming he's the chosen one. And in my sense, I don't think he is. He's just thinking he is, and the other religious zealots are going along with it. They've got their $30 silver. Another one is, thou shalt not kill. Well, let's see, how is that going for him? Well, there's something about blowing up these boats in Venezuela, those fishing boats. Those guys are out there just fishing, and then all of a sudden, they're being bombed. So blowing boats out of the water in foreign countries without authorization, that's pretty much killing these people. Well, let's go to the next. Here's a big one. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Now, adultery doesn't have to be with a porn star. But nevertheless, I don't think that matters. So I guess if you shag someone while you're married to someone else, then that's adultery. So yeah, that might work against you, Don. Oh, another one is thou shalt not use the Lord's name in vain. Well, with all the profanity he uses at his political hate rallies, looks like they got him on that one too. Oh, and here's a favorite. Thou shalt not bear false witness. In other words, thou shalt not lie. This guy lies every single day on a daily basis, on an hourly, if not a minute basis. So that's not going to help Don. Oh, and then the other commandment that immediately comes to mind is thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. So when you're bragging about using your authority and when you're famous, you can abuse that authority and grab women by their genitals, and they're not your wife, and the person is not consenting, then I think that's going to be probably falls within that category as well. Of course, surprisingly, none of the religious right, of course, comes out and identifies all these things, but I'm here for you, Don, and I'm going to give you some tough love and tell you you're kind of screwed when it comes to the 10 Commandments. So maybe you are onto something that whenever you die, that you may not go to heaven, and I can now understand that. However, although it seems like it's an uphill battle for you, Don, I do have some suggestions that might help. First and foremost, stop lying. This idea of not shall bear false witness. One of the things that I think could really help is to stop lying. And if you cannot restrain yourself that everything comes out of your mouth is a lie, then maybe you should seek some professional help from a real professional. not somebody that you appoint, of course, because I have serious doubts about the competency and the qualifications of the people that you appoint and the rubber stamp Republicans approve. And now, the second thing that you might want to think about, Don, to help you get into heaven, increase your odds, is ask for forgiveness. You've done a lot of bad things. We look back on the Ten Commandments, you seem about violating all of those, or at least, if not most of those. And we see bad behavior on a daily basis, hateful behavior. You talk about how you hate your enemies, and there's a long list of them, and how you prosecute your enemies, and you essentially turn our democracy into a banana republic because you figured, you're not going to be around here much longer, and so what if I kind of trash the place after the party? So by asking for forgiveness, that can go a long way because we're all human. Even though you think you're more than human, and I'm being the chosen one, I think that by asking for forgiveness would be a really good start as well. A third thing you can do, I think would be very Christian, is fire all of your staff and have somebody with sensibility. Bernie Sanders, for example, he's not perfect, but I'd trust him with my credit card. He'd be the only politician I'd trust him with my credit card. Is that I would suggest that you seek his advice and adopt his advice about the type of staff that you have. And the type of staff, some of my recommendations for staff is, number one, they be actually qualified. And number two, don't hire people from the Fox News network because it really raises the concern that these people are bimbos, hiring blondes, and people who have really thin qualifications or... Anyway, that's going to subject you to scrutiny. Now, I know that the Republican-controlled House and Senate has given you a blank check and has approved all of your nominations. And one can really wonder if, who was not approved. That is really sinking low, apparently. But the thing is that you really need help in this regard. Another way that you could help increase your chances is loving your enemies. Now, it's quite clear that you hate a lot of people. And those people that don't kiss your ass all become your enemies, and that's just a shame. So to do the real Christian thing, since you are apparently holding yourself as the chosen one and you've got all those religious people actually believing it, then maybe you should forgive your enemies and you should preach that as well. Not only just in words, but in action. And another way is perhaps that you can increase your odds is to give back all the money you've stolen. If you've ever stolen any money, if you've ever charged the government taxpayers for renting out rooms at the taxpayer expense where you profit, that's kind of unethical at the very least, and it's probably stealing it as well. So if you've engaged in any shady deals where you put yourself before the country, like accepting a $400 million jet, and then getting the taxpayer to pay another $400 million to retrofit it, and then keeping that plane after your presidency, after having used it for only a year, in my view, that's stealing. So you may want to reconsider that deal and perhaps take that, sell that plane if you must, and right now. And that $400 million will go a long way to feeding the poor and, helping people in dire straits. So that would be a good use of that $400 million instead of lining your own pocket with it. It's just a suggestion. Now, along the other thing that you might want to consider is giving away your entire fortune. Bill Gates, a bunch of those other wealthy people have pledged to and are giving away their fortune. And so, the Bible talks about how a rich man has got the likelihood of entering into heaven as a camel, trying to put a camel through the eye of a needle. Well, unless you make that needle really, really large and that camel really, really small, it's not going to fit. So you may want to seriously consider, giving away all your money and doing it sooner than later. And like today would be a really good gesture because, none of us know how long we're going to be on this earth. So it's all the more important to live a productive and a kind and loving life. And giving to others instead of taking from people. Another suggestion I would have is do not grope women. You on the Hollywood Access tape, you've been filmed saying about how when you're famous you can get away with it and you can grab them by the pussy. That's just bad. That's just wrong. You're exploiting your position of power. and you're grabbing these people by the genitals without their consent. And it needs to be express consent as opposed to implied. So you may want to give that some serious consideration. I know the religious right and the Republicans give you a pass on that, and they consider it locker room talk, but I've never heard that type of talk, actually, in my life about politicians bragging about their position of power and how they can abuse that. I actually have never heard that, except from you, actually. Oh, another thing, too, is you should give some serious consideration to stop these massive illegal operations regarding deportation. That did not go well for Hitler decades ago, and it's not going to go well for you in history. But it's time now to turn around and turn things around and actually become the Christian that you claim to be, and that you've so been able to hoodwink everybody and to think that you are. And so you stop separating children from their parents. That will have lifelong consequences for both parties, particularly children, because they're not little adults. Their brains have not grown, and they will struggle with it now and in the future. And for you to permit such a thing is, I can understand why you think that you might go not go to heaven just for that very thing. So I would reform your immigration stance and find a way to just come out and, in this idea of you asking for forgiveness, you should say, I just was wrong. And this was just not the right way to do it. And we should find a path for people who come to this country for better opportunities, to become citizens. And because these illegals are essentially paying taxes far more than they could ever get back in benefits, because they're not legally in this country. So, when you have this idea that the Speaker and the Republicans talk about how the Democrats are wanting to give health care to illegal aliens, that's a lie too. And so don't follow the Republicans, because they're lying. And this is their opportunity to get on board and follow some of my earlier advice. Now, the other thing to consider is two more things. Two more things for you to consider, Don. Is one of them is that you should tell your puppet, Mike Johnson, that it's okay now to release, to swear in that new House representative that's been elected to Congress, and release the Epstein files and let the chips fall where they may. Now, I know a lot of people are thinking that, you might be in those files, and there might be pictures of you with naked women in those files. And it would be even worse is you in those files with naked women that are underage. That would be really bad. But also, it's likely that many of your donors and the people that are controlling you, Don, are in those files. But so in this idea of you ultimately wanting to go to heaven, then this is your opportunity to turn things around and actually increase your odds. And you can do that by releasing the Epstein files. Because otherwise, it may end up is that if you don't become that wonderful person that we all hope that you can become, that you're not yet, is that you don't want to be at the same place as Epstein. Maybe you two guys are buddies, and, I don't know, maybe you do. Maybe you want to be back with your buddies. But I really don't think it's going to be as pleasant as it was while living here on Earth. That's just my opinion. And the final thing that you should consider to increase your odds of going to heaven is stop lying. I know that was the first thing, but I also say it's the last. It's the alpha and the omega, because, you really need help with that lying situation. Not to lie more, but to lie less. And I think really what it is you really need to get help with that. So those are my suggestions. None of this is, of course, a guarantee, but, you want to increase your odds. It's kind of like when you had the casino that I think went bankrupt, but I think you're familiar with odds. And like the odds that you actually got reelected. But, miracles always happen every day. And you can become part of that miracle if you turn it around. So, best of luck. It's never too late. Life like fiction is never too late to revise. And so that executive order that you issued to God is not enforceable. It probably won't work. I know it won't work, but the other things but instead of executive orders, you should really turn your life around and become a much better person and stop associating with those Republicans because they're just bad news. So until next time.